Good afternoon. I'm Nikki Lunsford with the Ball State University Middletown Research Project, and we're working on social service organizations and their impact they have on our community and how they've changed over time. Today is February 4th, 2019. We're in the lobby of Big Brothers Big Sisters in Muncie, Indiana. Sue Godfrey has agreed to sit and speak with us today about her life, her passions, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and how it's changed over the time. Thank you for joining us, Sue.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
My first question to you this afternoon is, tell me about your background, your life story that brought you to this seat that you occupy.
Great. So I was born in California and moved quite a bit with my dad's job. He was a salesperson, and so he went from all of Kansas to half of Ohio in my childhood. So I grew up in Northeast Ohio, Akron area, and growing up, my grandmother had grown up in Muncie. That was part of, she actually said she was born here, but we've later found out she claimed this rather than the coal town in West Virginia that she was born in.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I didn't really have ties here, but have landed here, came for Ball State, and never left. So I have 3 younger brothers, and my parents divorced when I was in high school, and so 2 of us graduated from high school, and my 2 youngest brothers never did. And so part of how I got into social service work was seeing that I was just one step from a lot harder life like what I saw my brothers having to go through. One is now a small business owner and does very well for himself, and the other continues to struggle. And so I see in the faces of the children we serve, my brothers, and I see often these struggling moms, I see my mom's face, who worked several jobs and really tried to do her best, but was always kind of, her arms weren't quite long enough, the days weren't quite long enough. And so it really inspired me to work to help those who need a hand up. And who need someone to look at them and see the humanity in their eyes and see that they are struggling, that families do love their kids even when life gets hard sometimes.
Yes, I see the little wristbands and the word potential on all of your walls, and that's what you're saying in a longer voice. You're
Yes.
seeing the potential
Yep.
rather than the circumstance.
Right. I worked for several years, worked with United Way, a project I worked on. I worked with Felicia Scaife, who's part of the Schools in the Context of Community at Ball State. And one of the things that we worked a lot on, she and I, were looking at parents as the experts on their children. So whether or not a parent works for a fast food restaurant or lives on government assistance, that they are an expert when it comes to their children. And when we're engaging with them in the programs and in the work that we do, really engaging with the parents as though they are the expert of their children and joining with them as a partner in defending the potential of their children. That's important to me and in the work that I do. And really the most important thing that I look for when I'm looking for new staff is their the way that they talk about and their philosophy toward the families and the children that we work with.
The lens they see
Yes.
all people with, and that's a rich story and a good background. So before you worked with Felicia Scaife, where were you for that? Before then?
So my career, I worked my first 10 years of my career before I had children. I worked in the workforce development and in higher ed. So my job was somehow engaged with helping kids who were either at risk for not finishing high school or who hadn't finished high school to help them find their way and their what next. So I worked for a workforce development program that helped high school students or kids age 14 to 21 finish either high school or their GED, and was recruited out of that to work for Ivy Tech as their director of student services for a couple of years under Mary Llewellyn, and helped really people who weren't sure what they wanted to do make decisions on what field of course of study they were going to go toward, and also helped as Ball State had changed their admissions requirements. Kids who maybe had thought they were going to be able to go to a four-year college but weren't able to be admitted, helped them get the courses that they needed to give them to make them able to get to the four-year college.
The Bridge
program.
The Bridge. Ivy Tech
It was
is
called Connect. Yeah.
working hard on that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So how have the services that this organization provides changed over the past 20 years?
So
Has it been around that long?
yes, so our agency started here in Muncie in 1970. So we're closing in on 40 or on 50 years, but our agency as a whole has been around since 1906. So Big Brothers Big Sisters has almost well over 100 years.
What precipitated it in 1906? I'm trying to think of.
So in 1906, I think it was the same things that we're dealing with now, and that happened in 1970 was we were looking at children who needed someone to help them transition. So in 1906, we would have been really the Industrial Revolution was beginning, right, or was kind of on its way, and so often children are not really looking beyond what their family unit is able to do. So if dad's a farmer, child will be a farmer. If dad's a laborer, child will be a laborer. And so part of the work that we do with Big Brothers Big Sisters is both to help kids who maybe have lost a parent see what a family looks like, or to help them see the world outside of their own neighborhood or family. So my husband was little. His dad died when he was 5, and his mother was a single mom. Her family was several hours away, and he was signed up when he was in the 4th grade so that he would have someone to just kind of show him. And while my mother-in-law was a good provider for her family and a really strong single mother, he had never really sat down at a dinner table with mom, dad, and kids in the way that he did with his big brother. His big brother was an engineer, and he did not have a family history of people going to college, and he's now a professional and a partner at the firm that he works for. And so his big brother really just helped him see the world in a new way, and I think that's been from the get-go, from the time our organization started, what the goal is for children to be able to see a new way to live and higher, to really rise to their full potential.
That's a lofty goal.
Yes.
So how has it changed from 1906? I mean, we know that some things have stayed the same, but how has it changed?
So I would say one of the biggest ways that it's changed is the things that we do for child safety. So in the time in between, we've really found that a lot of organizations don't allow children to be one-on-one with an adult, and that's their safety measure. But we believe that life change happens through relationship, and so we take a lot of measures to make sure that those relationships are safe. So starting from the time that a person applies to be a volunteer, it takes us about 6 weeks from the time someone expresses interest to when their application is completed with us. And during that time, we do a 4-level, multi-level background check that looks at their federal, state, and local background through the police and different government entities. And then we also do a multi-layer references. So whereas most of the time you're not wanting to get a parent or a spousal equivalent reference because those will be glowing, we have so many markers that we're looking for things that indicate there might be something concerning, that we always speak with a spousal equivalent or roommate, as well as a friend, and then an employer. And if someone's ever worked with children before, we have to speak with everyone that they've worked with in the last 5 years if they've worked with children. So we have some markers that we look for, trying to make sure that everyone's intentions are good. And we look at volunteering as it's not a right, and so we will, even someone who appears to be a good volunteer but has a couple of the markers, we'll have to decline on. So I think that's probably the biggest change that we have as an entity. Of course, we follow our matches and then do that. we follow our matches once a month. We talk to them once a month after a match is made in the first year, and then every year beyond that we speak quarterly. And when we speak to a match, we speak to both the little and their parent as well as the volunteer. And that's a really important piece of our safety. But also we look at, there's multiple relationships happening in every match. So there's a relationship between our staff and the parent. There's a relationship between the parent and the big, between our staff and the big, and our staff and the child. And so our goal is that we operate almost as a second big to both the parent and the child. And that's part of our safety measures also, is that we're making sure that we're hearing the same thing from every party, and that even the things that they're doing are safe.
And if I remember, when my daughter was a big, for a young lady, she was not allowed to bring her little to my house for a certain period of time.
Yeah, we have quite a few different measures like that we do. And so I believe it's 3 months is the waiting period before you can take a child home. And in that, we will have spoken to the different parties about 9 times. And so in that, we can say yes or no that they can go home.
That sounds like a valid measure. So have you seen an increase in the need for services?
I would say that we've seen an increase. However, parents do take very seriously who's with their child. And so we see both an increase in interest and need, but also there's a cautiousness that comes with that as well.
Okay, why do you think there might be an increase?
I think there's an increase in the need because we have a decrease in our relationships that are happening in our community. I think there's a lot of disconnected people, and also there's a lot of movement. So, for instance, my husband and I live here in Muncie, but his parents live 3 hours away. And so I think as people move and are moving around, the need for someone outside of your circle of friends to have influence with your child, I think that can grow. But also I think that parents are seeing their children depend on video games and other things online for their entertainment for their child. So we do see people reach out to us for that. But also here locally with the opioid epidemic that's really hit since 2015, 2016, I think we're seeing a lot of parents who are just struggling. And whether it's specifically, no parent's going to come to us and say, hey, I'm abusing drugs, can you help me with my kid? That's not really, but I do think that just in general in our community, what we're seeing more so is this morning, one of the littles that I approved to come into the program is being raised by his great-grandmother. And that is not the first great-grandmother that we have. And so very often it's a family member who's doing kinship care. And I can think of, several handfuls of families where it's a great-aunt or a great-grandmother who's raising children. One particular was very poignant. The great-grandmother said, I can't roller skate or teach her to ride a bike, and I need help with those just basic things. I'm in my 80s, but I know that I did wrong by her grandmother and that her grandmother did wrong by her mother, and by golly, we're going to get it right with her.
It was insightful for her. Right?
And how heartbreaking. Right. How heartbreaking. But families are looking for help. Families are looking, we all want our kids to be as great as to have that spark that we see in their eyes, to have them reach that potential, to have the opportunities the world affords to be accessible to them. And I think that's part of what having a mentor can do.
Okay. So how has your organization's relationship with its clients changed over the same time period? And that might get in with the safety.
Sure. Well, I think the other thing is, for a long time, Big Brothers Big Sisters looked at parents as a necessary conduit to the kids that we wanted to serve.
Oh.
And so, and I've actually read some things back from the late 80s that said, have as little contact with the parent as necessary. But really, I think we've made a shift in the past 15 years to really look at the parents as our partners. And again, I think I mentioned earlier to look at the parents as the experts on their children. And that's a key component to our safety. But honestly, sometimes I think parents don't trust us as that, because I think it's pretty common in social service that we're kind of trying to dig through what the truth and the lies. And I think we come to it as we're all partners working toward the same goal, which is to help the kids have new experiences, to see things through fresh eyes. And both the big and the little get to have joy from that. So that's one of the good things that we get to do.
That's a current best practice that floats now, is that we need to be partners with the parents.
Yes.
And yet gaining that trust is hard. It takes time
It does
and
take
intentionality. All right, so what are the key goals of this organization?
So our goal is, one of our key goals is to recognize the potential in each child, and to help them reach for that through thoughtful, meaningful relationships that are professionally supported, one-to-one mentoring relationships between a child and an adult.
What do you consider an adult?
You just have to be over 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what challenges are you finding in trying to address that goal?
So I think that the word mentor can sometimes be off-putting to people. People don't think of themselves, if you don't think of yourself as a leader or someone who has a lot to offer, you can self-select out of being a mentor. And so part of what we get to do is get to recognize the good in everyone. And that's not to say that everyone can be a mentor, but to start to have conversations with people where we're identifying the strengths and the good that they have to give as part of the joy that we have in helping adults become mentors. So we're able to do that both with the children that we serve and the adults. And like I said, I think we're doing that with parents and recognizing them as the expert on their children, but then also with the volunteers that we work with, able to really help them see their own potential and the good things that they have to give. And so that's part of the joy of recruiting volunteers, is showing them how much they have to offer.
Do you have trouble finding volunteers?
We have trouble finding male volunteers. In general, it is not uncommon for us to have a waiting list of women. So women self-select as mentors and self-select as a one-to-one relationship being a place where they could give back to the community. Men are less likely to do that. And I think part of what we're working to do right now is to try to help men see that being a mentor to a young man really gives them the opportunity to to enjoy being childlike rather than childish. So enjoy video games or going to Marvel movies or going to the comic book store, things like that.
Fishing,
basketball,
activity stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And so often I think, for instance, the girl that I mentor, we went to coffee once a week for 3 years. The same day, or sometimes it switched, but we would go to coffee and just sit and talk for an hour or 2 hours about her aspirations and goals and all those things. And I think my husband would have a lot of other things he'd rather do than sit for coffee once a week.
He would much rather fish or bowl or basketball. Right.
Do woodworking or something like that. Right. Work with his hands. And so helping to really help men understand, hey, you don't have to just sit and chat. You can play basketball or go for a walk or take a bike ride or play video games, that there are things that you can do together. And so often a child will talk about how impactful their mentor was or their big was for them. And the big says, oh, we didn't really do anything. But simply doing day-to-day activities with the child can actually be life-changing.
Time is an important commodity, which it sounds like that's what you work with.
Yes.
So how have these goals changed over time? I mean, it seems like those would be the goals from the start to now.
I don't know that they really have. I think that there might be some small changes in the things that we've done, but we still require 4 hours a month of volunteering. I think that largely our mission has stayed the same, which is to have professionally supported one-to-one mentoring relationships that base work has been the same since 1906 when we started, and definitely since 1970 since we've been here in Muncie.
Very well. Very well. So what are, in your view, are the root causes of the challenges that you have come across in meeting the goals of your organization?
So I think time is one of the biggest challenges that we face. Again, time for both the littles and the bigs. That's one of the biggest challenges. But I think when you get down to the root challenges, there's two things that I see. One is that relationships are hard. And we often can say, oh, if you know how to be a friend, you can be a mentor. But really, my staff who do those monthly and quarterly calls, they're really relationship advisors. And so navigating, it's hard for, I think, a middle-class volunteer to understand that it might be difficult for the mom that they're working with to have access to the internet or to have her phone turned off periodically. And some of those things can be hard. And really, when we're looking at the root causes of why do kids need someone outside their family to help support them, the root of that is sometimes we discount what our family says to us. The root of that isn't necessarily that how dysfunctional our family is necessarily. I think sometimes people can apply that to our agency, but the root is really that often having someone who's not paid to care about us we feel that makes us feel good. It makes us feel special and seen. When our mom loves us, she's just supposed to.
Right.
But when someone else elects to care for us and to really commit to us, it doesn't in any way replace the love of a parent or family, but it can give an extra source of encouragement, an extra source of certainty to someone who's not certain of their own value or not certain of their own place in the world. And that's one of the beautiful things that mentoring can do.
Yes.
But I think our increase in need for it is really surrounding there being less men in the homes. And that's why I think we have such a struggle to find mentors for the young men that come to us. It's often a single mom or single adult, single family head of household who's wanting a man, young or old, to be able to speak into the life of their male child. So a lot of times we see those parents or female guardians reaching out to us at about age 11, which I think at that point they can see the little boy becoming a man, but it hasn't quite happened yet. And so that's when I looked at our list of what boys we have to match right now. They were all 10, 11, and 12. We had a couple of outliers beyond that, but that's
very impressionable ages.
Yes.
That you still can turn the tide.
Yes.
Either way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, what is your budget? What challenges have you had in finding staff or expertise for your organization?
That's a great. So, I think the challenges for staff for me are that our budget is very small, and I don't think we're able to pay staff as high of wages as we need to, and so therefore we have some turnover. As we're looking for staff, we have to have bachelor's degrees. That's part of our national guidelines for any of the volunteer or child-facing roles. So someone in a front desk role doesn't need to, but pretty much everything else has to. But we're still paying in the mid to low $30,000 range, and that's very.
That's poverty level.
That's yeah.
So a bachelor's degree earning poverty level would be hard.
Yes.
To take.
Yes. And so because we have so much connection to the community and the work that we do, we're constantly suggesting activities or things that matches can do, and we're partnering with lots of different community entities, which means my staff are making good connections. And so then it is easy for them to pivot to something that might pay a little bit better because they're making good connections. And so keeping good staff once they're trained can be difficult because naturally through their work they're finding finding other opportunities. And so part of what we do is we try to make a really hospitable and really flexible work environment. That doesn't cost a lot. Kindness doesn't cost a lot, even as an employer.
Right.
So that's part of what we're looking at. And then working to raise our budget is another piece that we're looking at too.
Okay. Well, and that's where we go next.
Okay.
Is your budget. What is your budget and what are the sources of your funding?
So our budget, we've been operating at about $150,000 to $160,000 for about the last seven or 8 years. We're working this year to raise it to $200,000 annually through adding a new fundraiser and putting in place some monthly opportunities for monthly giving so that community members and people who are excited about our work could give that way. Our sources of income, we raise about $50,000 through fundraisers that we do. We do have some individual donations that come in from community members who support our work, and then we get a small amount from United Way annually, about 10% of our budget, and then grants.
Okay.
We will, in 2019, we believe that we will be awarded a federal grant through the state of Indiana the state of Indiana as a pass-through. But currently the federal budget has not been approved, and so we are waiting for that. So we were notified in November that pending the budget passing, we would receive this, and now it's February and we're still waiting.
All right.
So
All right.
we'll see, but that is a 3-year grant. So
a 3-year grant. So you'll get an allotment of that money this year, next year, and 2021
after. Yes.
That's hopeful.
Yes.
But how do you gain access to the other sources of financial support? Your grants.
How do
you gain access to those grants and other sources of you've got your fundraisers and you have grants? How do you decide when to do your fundraisers? Where do you go to get your grants?
So
community foundations?
Yes, we actually have hired a grant writer here in the last year or two who researches grants for us. But I think that largely our grants come from the local places who support nonprofits. So the Ball Brothers Foundation and the George and Frances Ball Foundation both have been very generous to us, as well as consistent funding through the United Way. And the Community Foundation has been a strong partner to us in the 25 years plus that they've been in the community.
Okay.
So we've seen funding from them. We were started by the JCs here in Muncie, which has gone away now. They're no longer, but we've continued. So the JCs brought together several different community groups like that, and like the Optimist Club and some of the other ones that were part of that initial gathering that made that brought us to Muncie. They still, in some in large and some in small ways, are supporters of our agency.
Very nice. All right. So how is your organization impacted by local, state, and federal regulations? And then how has that changed over the
Sure.
time?
So our regulatory bodies, in general, the federal government, mostly we're just regulated by them for how we handle our 501c3 or our nonprofit status. At the state level, similarly, we have regulations just for how we manage donations. Locally, I don't see regulations that are really impacting us much. I think as we move forward and do have a federal grant, then we'll have some regulations that we'll have to work with under. I actually just have returned from Washington, D.C., and with some other partners from Big Brothers Big Sisters and the National Mentoring Network have lobbied on Capitol Hill for additional funding for mentoring, because mentoring is one of the few ways that we see that really can change the trajectory for children, particularly children in poverty. It's one of the biggest markers that can show lack of opportunity for a child is growing up in a family in poverty, and mentoring can have an impact on that trajectory. mentoring also can be a positive factor for children who are in a home that's impacted by substance use disorder or substance abuse in a parent. And mentoring can actually help the children who are impacted by adverse childhood experiences, can help them experience trauma or overcome the experiences of trauma.
Reduce toxic stress.
Yes.
So how do you find these children?
So right now, our largest source of references and inquiries come from parents and or guardians. We have a couple of counseling services in town that refer to us quite a bit. And then teachers and counselors will also refer. But the largest amount is a parent raising their hand and saying, parent or guardian saying, I'd like another voice, another adult to have, to be influencing my child.
How do they know about you? What avenues do you use to open the pipeline to people coming in?
So I've been the director for 2.5 years, and thus far we have not needed to open a pipeline. We have enough, I think, name recognition from being a national organization that people come to us. We are at a point now where we are getting some additional volunteers, and so we're needing to recruit for more children. And our first step there is to reach out to school counselors and teachers to say, if you have children who you're concerned might fall through the cracks, we would love to work with them. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking for, really. Not kids who have behaviors that a volunteer can manage. So not kids with really severe behavior problems, but those C students who maybe just need a little bit of someone kind of encouraging them.
With support.
And a little bit of extra support.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so other organizations in town come to my mind, like Motivate Our Minds and other things. Do you have connections to local faith communities or other organizations in town?
We do. Yes, we work really closely with other nonprofits. So come to mind, Motivate Our Minds that you mentioned. They might refer children who need some more one-on-one to us, and we'll refer children who need more after-school tutoring to them. So we cross-refer. We have one and are willing to do more cross-referral with Project Leadership, who mentor specifically high school-aged children. And so we have one match who is enrolled there because they have some resources for a kid who maybe is falling behind and wants to go to college. So they have some resources to keep them on track for college readiness. So we'll partner with them. We have a site-based program that's inside the Ross Center, and so we work with them and would like to see more site-based programs, conversations with the Boys and Girls Club about doing that, and possibly with the schools. So we look at our other nonprofit friends as partners who can help move our children forward, and so love to share resources, ideas, opportunities with them. The Y is a wonderful partner to us, so they allow all of our bigs to be able to, even without a membership, take their little in to do activities there. So like you'd mentioned earlier, a match can't go to the home of the big until they've been matched for several months, and so going to the Y to play basketball or things like that is an option for them, as well as there's some parenting classes and some other things, and they'll allow our families to come at the member price even if they're not, and they have such great scholarship options. So we love to refer our families to different things, programs at the art museum. Or
well, what about communities? What about faith communities?
Oh yes, so faith communities, we love to work with the faith communities, particularly to recruit volunteers, but often other opportunities arise as you're doing that. So there's an on-campus church that regularly throws a Christmas party for our littles and does crafts with them. We have a couple of faith communities who have some foster parents that are part of that, and so they'll refer both bigs and littles to us from them. We will work with small groups sometimes who want opportunities to engage with the community. So often groups want to go paint or do something where they can just spend 2 hours, but our work is over time. It takes a longer commitment, but I think has a greater opportunity to really change lives.
To make an impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
So faith communities seem like a natural partner because they also are wanting to see bigger futures for people and make an impact.
Okay. So how does the site-based management or site-based, is it like in the Boys Girls to recruit kids? Is it a place to get volunteers?
So a site-based program basically means that we can reduce the number of contacts that we need to make with a parent because we have a staff person who's overseeing the match. So if you can imagine, we have to make a monthly contact with a parent for the safety of their child. If the school reports that the parent is hard to get a hold of, if we have a difficult time getting a hold of a parent to set up appointments and other things, then we won't be able to, over the course of the match, keep the child safe. And so that was sometimes a reason that we wouldn't enroll a child in the program and that we would have to decline a child to be part. And so what a site-based program does is it reduces those number of contacts that we have to have with a parent because we have a staff person who is on site and trained and can evaluate the safety of the match in the moment. And so that's the difference between what we call community-based, which is our general mentoring program that we've been doing for so many years, and a site-based program. So it basically just means that one of our staff people is on site at that, whatever site it might be, the Ross Center, the Boys and Girls Club at a school. We do Lunch Buddies, which is another name for a site-based program. And it just allows us to enroll kids who maybe meet all of our other criteria, and yet their parents can be hard to get in touch with. Again, phone numbers can become invalid. There just can be a million reasons for that to happen, but it allows us to be a little bit more flexible there. It doesn't change any of our requirements for our volunteers, but it does let us kind of open the door a little bit wider for the kids that we serve.
Very interesting. So, Sue, you filled me in. I feel much more educated on what you do and who you touch and how you got here. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, that's a great question. I can't think of anything. Probably think of it tomorrow.
That will probably happen. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited about what you do and the impact that it makes in our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.